Okay, well, let's get started. Let me say good morning to all of those of you who are joining us in Canada, and good evening for those joining us from the Middle East. Um, my name is Scott Jolliffe. I'm the chair of the Canada Arab Business Council. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the CABC, we're Canada's not-for-profit business forum that serves to promote trade and investment between Canadian businesses and institutions and those in the Arab world. I can tell you that our sole purpose is to help create and enhance business relationships between and amongst our countries through business forums like this, through mentoring programs and networking and education. We work hand in hand with representatives from our respective governments, their diplomatic, consular, and trade services. And we're delighted to see that there are many representatives on our webinar today from both the federal and provincial governments, as well as several ambassadors and chargés d'affaires and their representatives from many of the Arab countries. Your Excellencies, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. I also welcome the senior representatives and members of some of our very important sister organizations, such as the CBC Dubai, CBC Abu Dhabi, the Canada UAE Business Council, the Kuwait Canada Business Council, the Canada Saudi Business Council, and the Canada Algeria Business Council. Let me also just say at the outset a very warm thank you to our sponsors, the World Trade Center in Toronto, the Export Development Corporation, and of course the Canada Expo 2020 team, as well as the Gowling WLG law firm for hosting this seminar. And also a great thank you to our patrons of the Canada Arab Business Council, Al Aroud, the McCarthy's law firm, Sky Power, and of course our former chair, Mohammed Al Zaibak, and his company, CDMC. We're very pleased to see that there are over 200 participants in this webinar. So a very warm welcome to all of you. So let me take a minute to introduce our panelists. First of all, André Frenette. He is the Interim Commissioner General for Canada at the 2020 World Exposition in Dubai. He brings a great wealth of experience to that position, having served as Canada's Deputy Commissioner General at the World Exposition in Japan, and before that as Canada's Manager of Programming at the World Exposition in Germany. André has dedicated his career to serving Canada as Director General of the Latin America and Caribbean Bureau and the South America and Inter-American Affairs Bureau, and most recently as Canada's Ambassador to Haiti. So thank you for joining us, André. Also today, Jody Becker, known to many of you. Jody's the Chief Strategist and Senior Vice President at EllisDon, a world-leading construction and building services company based in Canada. As Chief Strategy Officer, Jody works with her senior management and board to forecast areas of growth and development and the execution of EllisDon's plans. Importantly for today's discussion, Jody is the person responsible for overseeing all commercial and operational functions at EllisDon in the project management division across Canada and internationally, including EllisDon's longstanding business in the Middle East, which I might say includes the design, build, and maintenance of Canada's Pavilion at Expo 2020. And finally, Phil Jones, who joins us from Dubai. Welcome and good evening, Phil. Phil is the managing director of B+H Architects, also a world-renowned designer and solutions provider. Phil has spent his entire career delivering large, complex, mixed projects in the UAE, in Bahrain, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. And at B+H, Phil is known for his ability to deliver award-winning projects with teams across many disciplines and multiple geographies. And of course, apart from coming from the same hometown as me, Thornhill, Phil is currently serving as the chair of the Canada Business Council in Dubai in the Northern Emirates, with whom we're delighted to partner for this webinar. So with that, let me turn to you, André, and tell us a little bit about Canada's plans for Expo 2020, how it came about, and the purpose of our participation.
Well, thank you, Scott. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Scott, and thank you to the CBC for organizing this webinar this morning. It's a pleasure to be on this panel with both Jody and Phil. These are indeed unprecedented times. I hope that everyone who's joining us this morning are safe and healthy, your families as well, and your employees. Chers amis, c'est un vrai plaisir d'être avec vous ce matin pour ce séminaire. J'espère que vous êtes en bonne santé, vos familles aussi, et vos employés. I would like to take this opportunity as well to note that tomorrow marks the start of Ramadan. To those of you who are observing this holy month, I offer my warmest wishes for a blessed and peaceful Ramadan. Colleagues, organizations around the world have been making some very difficult decisions concerning their operations during this difficult time, and Expo is no different. Yesterday, the Executive Committee of the International Bureau of Expositions, the BIE, met in Paris to discuss the situation and voted unanimously to postpone the Expo for 1 year. So the new dates will be October 1, 2021 to March 31, 2022. Now this decision will need to be confirmed by the General Assembly of the BIE with a required 2/3 vote, which should happen later in the month of May. We commend this decision by the Executive Committee. We think it's the right decision. And we also applaud the leadership of the UAE in prioritizing the health and well-being of citizens. So what does this all mean, this postponement? We could look at it, in my view, we could look at it from two perspectives. One, we could be disappointed at this postponement because so much effort and time and resources have gone into planning this. Or we could see it as a great opportunity to take a step back and reflect on how collectively we can seize on really this truly unique opportunity to advance our commercial, trade, and investment interests in the UAE, in the broader Middle East, and Northern Africa region as well. In my view, it's the latter, and I think we need to talk about that. First, from an operational perspective, we will continue to build the Canada Pavilion in Dubai. You can see that beautiful building behind Jody. We will continue to build this, and Jody can speak more about this. And we will advance this as far as we can until later this summer, where we will take a pause for the better part of the next year. We will also pause on the development of our public presentation, the story that we want to tell of Canada through this public presentation. We need to reflect. We need to take a step back here and reflect on the Canadian story post-COVID-19. The theme for Expo 2020 is the future in mind. And that theme was inspired by Canada's steadfast approach and commitment to embracing diversity, inclusion, human rights, gender equality as the foundation to building a prosperous and inclusive nation that provides innovative solutions to global challenges. That theme is more relevant now than it has ever been. But we need to take advantage, I think, of this postponement period to reflect on what this crisis means for Canada and on what the crisis means for Canadian global leadership. What will our contribution be post-COVID? We need to think about this. And I think that several of you on the call today are integral to that conversation. We will also take a pause on our programming. Several of our partners who are critical to our success, provincial, territorial, municipal governments, trade associations and commissions, business councils, the private sector, civil society, and others, are busy now managing through this crisis, and that is understandable. So we'll take a little breather, we'll let the dust settle a little bit, and then we will fully re-engage to ensure a whole of Canada approach to this wonderful opportunity. In the meantime, however, our planning for a comprehensive program to advance Canadian commercial trade investment interests in Canada will continue. And on this, I want to be very clear in my message to you today. The main driver of Canada's participation at Expo 2020 in Dubai will be to advance our commercial trade and investment interests in the UAE and in the broader Middle East and North Africa region. We need to think about this, and we need to think about how we will maximize our presence in Dubai and how we'll use this platform to advance critical issues, including the importance of keeping the global supply chain overall operating well. The Canada Pavilion will house a state-of-the-art business area, conference center, a boardroom, a lounge and an outdoor terrace for receptions and hospitality events. This is being built for you. All of these spaces are being built for you at no charge, to be used at no charge, including AV services. This is fully supported and funded by the Government of Canada through Global Affairs Canada and through a generous contribution from Invest in Canada. There will be some costs, catering, simultaneous translation, and these will be offered on a cost recovery basis. So how can we fully seize on this opportunity? I see two ways. The first is through the CBC and other sister organizations. So I know that the CBC is planning business missions to Expo. Well-coordinated, planned, and funded missions under the banner of the CBC and others is one of the most effective ways where we can reach our objectives. We will support you every step of the way. Second, I also want you to know the important work of our Trade Commissioner Service continues. Our trade commissioners in the regions, and some of them are on this call this morning, will analyze the economic implications of this crisis to local markets and key industry sectors. This will include a revision of sector outlooks and identification of opportunities for Canadian businesses. So this review will be crucial in order to provide strategic advice to our Canadian clients and to help you seize business opportunities in a timely manner. So there is no pause for the TCS. As our trade commissioners continue to provide these essential services, these important services to Canadian companies, even through this difficult period. So I encourage the CBC, I encourage all of you, the members, to reach out to the TCS for information and guidance. And we will be providing a list of contacts to the CBC for all of your information. So Scott, I think I'll stop there and let others speak, and then look forward to questions. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, André. I have a few more questions for you though before we move on to discussing the impact of COVID-19 on the region generally. So maybe you could give us some of your thoughts about how Canada's participation, programming, and approach to Expo 2020 might change in light of this global pandemic.
Well, in two ways. I mentioned the public presentation. So at the core of this, at the core of what we want to communicate to our visitors and to the global community, is that Canada is an innovative country able to offer solutions to global challenges. Well, those challenges are changing, and we're in the midst of it now. So we need to, I don't know what the answers are, basically. We need to reflect on what this means. I'll give you an example. One of the countries participating at Expo has decided to change or to modify its approach to focus on distance learning. Well, all of us who are parents, all of you who are parents that are going through this understand the importance of distance learning. What a brilliant way to try and address this current crisis. We need your help. We need to be discussing with you, how does this impact us? And what kind of innovations will emerge from this in response to this crisis, where Canada can really show global leadership. There won't be any event like this one in 2021 leading into 2022 that will offer such an opportunity like the Expo platform will.
So, André, how do you see Canadian businesses and institutions, many of whom are on this call, working with the government, with our trade commissioner services, with global affairs generally, to restructure the theme and Canada's leadership role for Expo now 2021?
Yeah. Apparently, they're keeping the name Expo 2020.
Okay.
And I think we can understand why. There's a lot of promotional materials that have been prepared for this. But I think, Scott, we're going to need to have conversations with organizations such as yours and others, Invest in Canada, others in the country, about how they see Canada emerging from this. Like I said earlier, I don't have the answers. We're in the middle of this. We're still managing this crisis. We're still managing our response to this crisis. We will need to speak to business leaders across this country through a number of different associations to get a better understanding of how we emerge from this, especially from an innovation perspective. And what does that mean in terms of what we want to showcase in the pavilion on the public presentation side, but also in that conference center that I talked to you about. There's a space there for associations, for businesses, private sector and others to use to further their own objectives in terms of increasing their markets in those areas. The Trade Commissioner Service is there to do exactly that. Okay, and like I mentioned earlier, they're not taking a pause. They're working very hard to analyze what this all means so that in turn we can turn to our clients in Canada and provide strategic advice. I invite all of you on this call today, tradecommissioner.gc.ca. I invite all of you to go on the website, to look at these services and to contact those senior trade commissioners in those specific regions that you're interested in to get more information and analysis on the situation. But you know, it's too early to tell, I think, so for us to kind of develop this new narrative going into this Expo. And that's why I see this as a blessing, this postponement. We have the time now, from a business perspective, but also from a planning perspective. We have the time to take a step back and reflect on this. We can't do it alone. We can't do it alone. We're going to need you to help us in that reflection.
Okay, thank you very much, André, and we'll come back to you. But I do want to change the conversation a little bit to the impact that COVID-19 has had on Canadian business in and with the Arab world. But before I do, Jody, let me turn to you. And we see that wonderful backdrop of the Canadian Pavilion behind you. Tell us how the construction is going and how it may have been affected by this current pandemic.
Sure. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning, and Scott for keeping us organized, and my fellow panelists here. I get to feel like I'm on the Brady Bunch, which is amazing. And obviously send our best wishes to everyone around the world. We hope everyone is safe and well. And I'll echo Andre's comments and just wish everyone Ramadan Mubarak, who's recognizing the holy month coming. So yeah, we're as Andre said, we're in a state of mixed emotions around the Expo right now. It's both one of you know, a little bit of disappointment. We're obviously so excited to show everyone not only the beautiful building that you see behind me, but also the amazing public presentations that will be taking place inside. But also, as Andre said, we see this as a great opportunity to reflect on what is happening around the world. Obviously, everything that we do is currently being impacted by the COVID-19 situation. And that's certainly worth taking a step back and looking at how that will impact our lives going forward. And so it is a great time for reflection. In the meantime, we are pushing forward. As André mentioned, we are going to complete our part of the project this fall. The building will be erected. It's progressing very well. We've got great momentum. We've had tremendous help from our entire team, which includes both Canadian and UAE businesses. And so I have to thank all of our team members for all of the hard work that they've been putting into it. And certainly our EllisDon team has been working around the clock to make sure that we can deliver on time. And as André mentioned, the public presentation piece will be key. We'll be looking at how do we deliver Canada's new message while keeping to all of the themes that the Expo committee has set out. And as mentioned, they're more important now than ever that we come together. And I think the great relationship that has been held between Canada and the UAE will only be further bolstered and strengthened through this process. And I think that will be a great demonstration for us once we get through this time and as we look forward to October of 2021 now.
Thanks, Jody. And of course, the Canadian Pavilion in the UAE is not EllisDon's only project in the Arab world. Can you tell us a little bit about how this pandemic has affected your business and your projects in some of the Arab countries?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we're very proud to have had our business in the region for, this is our 17th year in the region. And our work in the region has been focused primarily on providing very high quality construction services, which include, as you mentioned, Scott, project management, but also virtual design, intelligent building design, and facilities management consulting, and of course, sustainability. We've been very proud to call the region our home, and we've been doing work in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in Afghanistan, previously in Kuwait, and we're always looking at expanding our footprint within the region. The Middle East has always been a region for us that has allowed us to expand our reach, expand our skill set, embrace innovation, and do things a little bit differently than even sometimes we're allowed to do, or some of our clients are willing to do in Canada. So it's been a very special relationship for us. Through this most recent period of change and flux, obviously we've had to look at how we are doing everything with a focus on keeping our team safe, keeping all of the workers on each of our projects safe, and that's been very important. So of course, that's had an impact on our business, but we've been working very closely with all of our business partners to make sure those key objectives are met. And I really have to applaud the region for the foresight that went into obtaining the ability to test as many people for the virus as they've been able to do. I know thousands and thousands of tests have been going on daily. And that's been a remarkable ability, it's provided a remarkable ability to carry on with our work, that rapid and expansive testing. And I think that's been a great example for the rest of the world. And we've been able to carry on with our projects. All of our teams are working, albeit with special protective measures in place. So we're also very optimistic going forward. We see a lot of new projects. We're responding to a lot of RFPs in the region. We see a continuing momentum. I think the region and Canada will both be shining examples of how infrastructure can be, again, a great bolster to the economy once we start to come out of this situation.
So let me call on your strategic and growth forecasting skills and ask you, what's your prognosis for doing business in the Arab world post this pandemic?
Yeah, I will. I'll give it a 2 thumbs up, I guess. You know, we're very optimistic about the region. I think what we are seeing right now through this unusual time is what can happen when the world comes together to a common purpose. So I think there will be great opportunities for us to continue to do that in the region. You know, the Middle East has always embraced, as I said, that ability to innovate and the ability to move business forward through challenging times, to look at their own economies and change the way they're approaching it. So I think, you know, given the challenging economic times, I think the region will come out of this stronger than ever.
Thanks, Jody, and I love that optimism. So, Phil, let me turn to you. You're on the ground in the region, and obviously in touch with your members of the CBC, Dubai and Northern Emirates. What's it like in terms of how you're able to, and your members are able to carry on business in the region during this pandemic? I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Yes. So, Ramadan Kareem and Assalamu Alaikum. We are finding that it varies across our membership. Obviously, people in the hotel and restaurant business are drastically hit, and car leasing and the like. As you know, part of our mandate in the region is the growth in tourism to this market, which at this time is next to zero. So that part of the world is very much challenged. As Jody was mentioning, our business as architects, we're still attending sites that are under construction. We too are finding that we're bidding large projects that are sort of earmarked for when this pandemic gets under control, which seems to be in the very near future, hopefully. And so, you know, I think they are earmarking infrastructure as a key way to come back. I think the wisdom in pushing Expo to October of 2021 is very wise, because I think it's going to take a substantial length of time before tourism, the confidence in consumers to come back to tourism is going to take a while. So, but you know, it's amazing, this new technology that we're using today. I'm running site progress meetings from my home office, and with teams of people in various offices, with teams of people on our construction site, all wearing their PPE equipment. And the construction parts, I mean, our contractors are ahead of schedule, which is amazing. So,
so your responsibilities include countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait. How are things going there? Are they under similar lockdown restrictions as we are in Canada and you are in the UAE?
Yes, yeah, it's the same. The Khalij region is the same. I can't speak for my knowledge of Egypt and North Africa, but the Khalij states are all in a similar level of lockdown as you are in Canada.
Okay, let's turn the conversation a little bit to the future. And Phil, maybe you can give us your prognosis of doing business in the region going forward post-pandemic.
Well, I think the Middle East is a very strategic market for businesses around the world, mostly because this market, and particularly the Emirates, has been using Dubai and Abu Dhabi as a springboard into other markets. So, for instance, you know, 15 years ago, you wouldn't have found a hotel company here. Maybe Marriott would have had a outpost here. But in that 10 to 15 years, it's completely changed, and every international hotel brand has a development and design office here, and sometimes it's very difficult to actually get a hold of those people because they're flying into Africa and India and other parts of the world, and so they're using Dubai as a springboard. And you find that amongst a lot of large corporations where they are setting up in this region as a platform to springboard into other markets. And I think that is really what will continue to grow and will be the return of this economy, is that continued need to have that presence here in order to springboard into those markets. And in terms of this technology, I think we're going to see more of this. We're going to see fewer people on airplanes, which will reduce overhead costs and will improve connectivity. As the CBC in Dubai, we've transferred all our business learning events to this kind of platform, and we're getting huge positive uptick from our members and our sponsors. So, I think we're all going to learn a great lesson from what's been going on to help us move into the future.
Thanks, Phil. So Jody, what's your prognosis? Tell us a little bit about how you feel about the future of business in the region, obviously for Canadian businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Phil's comments. I think this current situation is teaching us how to do things differently. And so I think that will impact business not only in the region, but around the world. How we do things will be obviously different. We've discovered that this is possible now. So I think it will inevitably have an impact on how we do things. But I think it will also drive further innovation from a market that already embraces it. And so things, how we build will inevitably change, whether it's modular, whether it's prefabrication, whether it's 3D printing of projects. I think that will definitely change, where we can work in more controlled environments. I think that will, what we build will change as well. I think people will come out of this experience recognizing that perhaps the massive, commercial business spaces that we all work within now, maybe we look at those types of commercial spaces differently now. Everyone had previously gone to open concept workspaces. I wonder if that will change. And then certainly the technology that we put into what we build will change as well. There will be a greater focus on how we work within those spaces, what we do within our homes, our residences will change. And I also think that, the focus on how we operate and maintain those facilities will change as the result of this experience. So I think we will continue to push forward. We're a leader in the region in intelligent buildings, and I think that's a great opportunity for us. Technology as a focus through the design and construction process will inevitably be a big focus for us going forward as well.
So let me ask you a question that is probably on the minds of many people who are not Canadian businesses, not currently doing business in the region. What are some of your recommendations for success in beginning to embrace the region as an important market?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the region has changed obviously as the entire world has over the last couple of decades that we've been there. But I think a really important part of doing business is building relationships. That's kind of our mantra, obviously, at EllisDon. But it's been really an important driver for us in the region, working together with organizations like the Canadian Arab Business Council and the CBC and the CUBC, and all of the related business councils has been very important for us. as well as working with the Government of Canada and the Trade Commission and consulates and the ambassadors. Though that experience has really opened up a lot of relationships for us. And then working really hard with our clients to express to them what it means for us as Canadians to in the region, why it's so important to us, and our firm commitment to stay in the region for as long as we can, and to help bring everything that we have to the region, and also bring back what we've learned to our experience in Canada.
Thanks, Jody. Well, just back to you, André, for a couple of questions. You had mentioned some of the services that the Government of Canada makes available through global affairs and our missions in these countries. What would your recommendation be for Canadian business that is interested in looking into and hopefully developing some trade or investment with the region?
Thanks for that. Before I answer the question, I just want to go back to a previous point of when we're reflecting on the future. One of the things that we keep hearing about in this global discourse is the concept of economic nationalism, and that scares me. That concerns me. That we're in that world of responses to the current challenge, and we're seeing many countries questioning the value of this interconnectedness of our economies and looking more inwards than outwards. I really hope that that is a short-term reaction to the current crisis, and we'll emerge from this with a much better understanding and appreciation of how important it is to continue in valuing the interconnectedness of our economies and building strategies to reinforce those, right? And how do we use platforms like Expo, and there are others, to benefit from this. And as Phil was talking about earlier, the how to use these strategic markets like the UAE in the region as a springboard to others. We really need to emphasize this as we go forward. For Canadian businesses that are quite frankly struggling right now, and that are impacted quite severely on this, now is the time to think about how you expand your market into the region. I mentioned earlier that our trade commissioners are analyzing the impacts of this, and we'll be able to provide advice based on this review, based on this analysis. My advice to the businesses, Canadian businesses that are on the call this morning, is to reach out. Is to reach out to the STCs and to seek that kind of advice, even if it's now, even as preliminary, to have a sense of where they think this is going and where they think the opportunities lie. And then from that, think about how you can use this platform of Expo in 2021 to further those objectives. I just want to reinforce, though, that I think one of the most effective ways to do this is by being coordinated. And going through some of the missions that you guys are talking about, Scott and others, I think is the most effective way to do it. So my advice to companies would be to reach out to the CBC as well, and to others, and see what their plans are for Expo, so that you can join, that you can be part of it.
Yeah, thanks, André. And yeah, not to give a special plug for the CABC, but part of what you say is what we do, and that is connecting people with the right people and sources of information and assistance. So let's just move on. I think time is marching on, and we want to end this call within the next 15 minutes or so. So let me turn to our the CABC president, Kathy Sagan, herself a veteran in terms of doing business in the region, having led the Sick Kids international initiatives, particularly focused on the region. Kathy has been monitoring your questions. And Kathy, are there some questions that you'd like to direct to the panelists?
Yes, may I just say good morning, everyone, and it's wonderful to have as many participants as we do on the call this morning. And so hoping that everyone is staying safe and healthy, and Ramadan Kareem, and also to our colleagues, bonjour. So with that, there are a number, there's a comment, Jody, for you about the Canadian Pavilion and how wonderful it looks, and also a follow-up to see how companies can access the building structure and post-event how the space may be used. And so I think we'll connect through an answer with that one. André, probably this question, and you've alluded to this throughout your presentation, which has been great. And I think that for the sectors that are on the call and for talking about Canada and being a global leader and innovation, you did give one example of another country who's looking at distance learning. But in this time that we're taking this pause, can you just talk a little bit more about where you see the leadership of where Canada can really step ahead and provide that kind of leadership? Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Is it me first or Jody?
Yes, you first, please.
On the first, thanks for that, Kathy. On the first question, the first point, sometimes there's a misconception of what the Expo is and what the space is used for. And often companies will think this is a great opportunity to do a trade show style event. That's not what it is, okay? And so for companies thinking about having exhibits and bringing in, the general public to the exhibits, that's not what the Canada Pavilion Conference Center is for. It's really about bringing folks together, something like Scott mentioned earlier. It's about bringing partners together, having meetings, concluding arrangements and deals with other governments, with other partners, and so on. And of course, hosting receptions, hospitality events, and so on, and also benefiting from the fact that there's 192 other countries on that site, 192 other pavilions on that site, and how to use that opportunity in a strategic way. But it's not a trade show type setting. Kathy, we've been talking a lot recently about artificial intelligence, and that will be one of the core elements of the message, of the story that Canada will want to convey. Well, what does that mean? How do we use artificial intelligence in terms of medical services, for example, which is core to the conversations that we're having right now worldwide? We need, I think, to reflect on this and have a conversation with experts in the country on innovations around medical devices, medical services using artificial intelligence. Same thing with respect to aerospace, but in particular as it relates to climate change and our efforts to combat climate change. Earlier, I talked about Canada being an innovative country that offers solutions to global challenges. As the theme stands right now for the Canada Pavilion, the main challenge that we're trying to address is climate change. Now that may of course change a little bit given the current context that we're in, but climate change will certainly remain central to what we want to do. What are some of the technologies? What are some of the advances that we have made in Canada to address issues around climate change? There's some in particular in agriculture, there's some organizations on the call today that might have solutions to that. So those are the kind of issues that we're looking at, but we're going to take this pause and we're going to have a look at what is really the best way to move forward in showcasing those.
Great, thank you, André. I'll direct this question to Phil. Phil, over the last couple of weeks, we've actually been talking about how quickly the economy can come back in UAE, and some of the capabilities, financial capabilities that the UAE has. So there's a question here that talks about Canadian export business, and how do you see how do you see that advancing in the UAE, probably on the short term and on the long term? And do you see any restrictions to imports and exports between Saudi Arabia and Canada?
Before COVID, we were really working hard to, I'll tackle the last question first, where we've been working really hard to warm up the relationship with Saudi Arabia. I think we all look forward to a day when we can look to our partners at EDC and CCC for more support in that area in order to build trade, and we're hoping that with our Minister Champagne, that he will open up new relationship with the government of Saudi Arabia, and that will improve with time. I think Saudi Arabia will be looking to be more open and more as time goes by. They're going through a great cultural change. I've been there a couple of times in the last year, and it is remarkable the changes and the openness of society there. And talking with colleagues about whether it would ever go back, they said it would. They've done so much that it would be very hard to go back to the more conservative society that they had over a year or 2 years ago. So that's, I see Saudi as an opening up market. In terms of most of the Khalij states have significant amounts of sovereign wealth, not just the Emirates, but also Qatar and Kuwait. We see them seeing this as an opportunity to take some of that sovereign wealth and reinvest it in reigniting their economies after this crisis. We've heard of investments that are already planned for that. So I think, in terms of rebound, where governments that have to dig into taxpayers' coffers as opposed to digging into sovereign wealth funds have a harder time of recovery than I think the Khalij states will have. I think they will come back very quickly and very strong. So I think it's an ideal time to get here and start building those relationships. It's not going to happen instantly, as it won't happen around the world. I think people will be very cautious about how they move forward. But I do think the rebound will be quite strong and stable here in the coming 2 to 3 years. And so Expo 2020 in October of 21 will be an ideal opportunity for people to come and make those connections, build those relationships. And as partners with the CABC and CUBC, both the CBC, Abu Dhabi and Dubai are working to build a platform where when that delegation comes, we will have set up business-to-business meetings so that the pavilion can act in this way to help. And both the Greater Expo and our own pavilion has a series of theme weeks, and I believe there will be delegations built around those themes, and that will allow us to make sure that your business partners from this part of the world are there at those B2B meetings. So I strongly encourage Canadian businesses to look at this as a significant opportunity. As Jody was saying, it's all about relationships, particularly in this part of the world. They like to know who they're dealing with. They like to build that bond of trust. It's really important to be here to build that bond of trust.
And Kathy, I might just add to this to pick up on something that both Phil and André have said. The missions that the CABC is planning around Expo 2020 are all about business to business. This isn't Expo tourism. This is entirely about business and connecting businesses and institutions with each other. And to pick up on what André was saying, it's not just about the UAE. Countries like Tunisia and Algeria obviously Saudi and Qatar and Kuwait, are very much on our radar in terms of putting our businesses together with theirs. And most of these countries, including Egypt, for example, are at a significant growth phase in their future. And it's those opportunities that we're hoping to pick up on, using Expo 2020 as a bit of a focus for it.
Great. Thank you for that. And it's a question that I'm going to see maybe all three, and three of you might want to answer this one. They might, each of you have a different view of this, but one of our participants is asking, what do you see as one of the biggest priorities or focus in the UAE Canada business currently during COVID? So in the short term, whether it being weeks to months.
Wow.
It's a good question. Very good question, actually. One that causes pause and reflection for sure, but not a lot of time for that. So maybe just very quickly, just maybe 1 or 2 minutes from each of you.
Well, I'll kick it off. I think, you know, we've been seeing a big move to online shopping. There's a sort of upstart to Amazon here called Noon, which is doing a roaring business, and so is you know, food delivery services are doing extremely burgeoning businesses at the moment. But you know, I think the groups that can figure out how to get in there and help the airlines and hotels come back from this, anybody who's got some technology that would help connect people more into coming back to this market by air and staying in tourism, the more that they can assist with helping this market sell tourism will certainly help rebound this economy very quickly.
Hi, and I'll just jump in quickly. I think you know, I think both Canada and certainly a number of countries in the region are great leaders in healthcare, and we're certainly seeing how important our frontline healthcare workers and our facilities are in responding to situations like this. And I think there are a lot of lessons learned to share going back and forth between Canada and the Middle East in terms of how we've responded from a healthcare perspective to the current crisis, and how we can improve our facilities and our training for healthcare workers going. I think that's a good opportunity.
I agree with the thoughtful comments by both Phil and Jody. I would only add that that we need to continue to give some thought about ensuring that we not only preserve but strengthen the global supply chain, which seem to be weakened now. So this, to me, would be one of the priorities that we should all be thinking about.
And Kathy, if I may be so bold as to offer some thoughts on this, it's clear to me that that there's significant demand for consumer products throughout the region, and terrific opportunities for Canadians to get involved in the supply of consumer products. Agriculture is obviously very important in this time. They've been traditional areas of strength for Canada, but there's an ongoing need for education, especially now remote learning, healthcare, and you know, the hot area at the moment is telemedicine. And then, of course, as both Phil and Jody have confirmed, infrastructure is really big and very important going forward.
So we won't be able to, there's some terrific questions that we'll have to answer for those of you who have sent them in. We won't be able to, in the interest of time, be able to answer them, but we will follow up on them, which I think will be really important. I'm going to turn this back to Scott just to do a brief summary and overview as we move forward. But I do want to reach out, and I do want to thank Joelle Bover from Gowling WLG. She is the head of the international development, and we are very thankful to Gowling WLG for the platform that we're ever able to bring this webinar to you today. So thank you very much to Joelle. So Scott, with that, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Yeah, well, this has been okay. I'll be interested in receiving all of your feedback on it in terms of how we can improve this. I must say that normally the CABC events are in person, where we can all greet each other and have a good conversation and network. And we really, going forward, need to find ways to do that without physically being together. So I hope we can do that. And I think one of the ways is to have a lot of follow-up to this, either asking Kathy or me or Phil or Jody or André directly. And we are very happy to provide those connections. But going forward, we need to learn how to network better than we're doing on a webinar. Well, let me also say Ramadan Mubarak. To all of you, stay positive, stay healthy, and be creative. And we'll, as Canadians, we will overcome the impediments that are existing for us. So our next webinar, you'll get an announcement about. We're going to get down to a lot more specifics in different sectors about how to set up business-to-business relationships. So look for an announcement for our next seminar. It'll be in about 3 or 4 weeks. Anyway, as I say, Ramadan Mubarak. Thank you.